the Second World War, the Soviet Union and the United States of America fought together, united in their struggle to destroy Hitler's Third Reich. But within 2 years of the end of the war, great divisions had appeared between these two superpowers. In this program, we'll show these divisions reflected in contrasting pro-Soviet and pro-American films. The United States feared that the Russians, led by Joseph Stalin, wanted communism to dominate the world. Russians believed the United States were aggressive towards the Soviet Union and its allies. By 1947, both sides were talking again of war, this time a Cold War. Of May, May Day, was a traditional day for parades and celebrations in the Soviet Union. This Soviet film of the 1947 May Day parade shows the huge military strength the Soviets could still draw upon. The parade would have been a reminder to Russians of the great military victory they had won over Nazi Germany. At the time of this parade, Stalin was taking control of most of Eastern Europe, and the Red Army was the largest fighting force in the world. See how prosperous some of the people in the crowd look.
Марш военной техники замыкают бронетанковые части.
Images like that greatly worried the Americans, many of whom came to believe that Stalin wanted to take over the whole of Europe and beyond. But of course the United States had the atom bomb, and at this stage the Soviet Union did not.
The March of Time!
This cinema news report from The March of Time helped to shape the attitudes of people in the United States.
In many a U.S. home, conversations in recent years have been taking an abrupt turn to a topic of importance to all Americans.
Well, that's Cologne. It got blitzed worse than Frankfurt.
Who's this?
Well, that's us in Berlin with some Russians. This one is Dmitry Andreev. He's a sergeant in charge of a detail.
Russians. We should have cracked down on those bums at the end of the wall.
I can't understand what this fuss with the Russians is all about. Ones I met were good guys. We worked together all right.
Today, millions of Americans are preoccupied with the shift of events abroad in post-war years, which has turned many of them from admiration of Russia as a wartime ally to profound moral disapproval and fear of it as an ambitious and predatory rival power.
Everywhere I have been in the world, in Europe, in Asia, one thing is clear. The Soviet Union has proved again and again that it cannot be trusted. While Russia continues her aggressive attitude toward free nations, world peace, your peace and mine, will hang very precariously in the balance.
The U.S. government in Washington became increasingly suspicious and saw in every move that Stalin made a plan for world domination. This official U.S. film looks back on 1947, the year which witnessed a growing divide between the Soviet Union and the United States.
As the year began, the United States was surmounting the last barriers to full reconversion. We were financially an island apart from the world. Our national income was predicted to exceed $200 billion. Never before had the nation known such freedom from want. But in this realm of abundance, we reigned alone. Across the vast expanses of the globe, there were famine, national ruin, pestilence, and moral disintegration. 4 horsemen driving civilization to the brink of an abyss. Without help, recovery might never be achieved. In the background was the growing struggle between 2 great powers to shape the post-war world. Looking toward Europe from Moscow, Soviet Russia was expansively stabbing westward, knifing into nations left empty by war, with misery and chaos as allies. On orders from the Kremlin, Russia had launched one of history's most drastic political, moral, and economic wars, a Cold War. The United States was obliged to help Europe safeguard its traditional freedoms and the independence of its nations. Gone was the spirit of wartime unity that reached its peak on that historic afternoon in April '45 at the Elbe River in Germany. Here, 2 worlds actually met, but this coalition was to be torn asunder. Already an iron curtain had dropped around Poland, Hungary, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, menace to the security and institutions of democratic government. A long-term, patient but firm and vigilant containment of Russian expansive tendencies. This declaration meant that Russia must be kept within boundaries already about equal to the circumference of the globe. From the Arctic, around the Pacific coast, North China and the Middle East to Western Europe, pressure points existed in the new containment offensive.
The Soviet Union had suffered appalling losses during the Second World War. 27 million men, women and children were killed. A third of the nation's wealth was destroyed. Stalin wanted to build a buffer zone between the USSR and the West to ensure that the Soviet Union would never again be invaded.
Предоставляет слово Иосифу Виссарионовичу Сталину.
When Stalin addressed the Soviet people, he didn't need to win their votes or persuade them of the rightness of his cause. As a dictator, public opinion was of no interest to him. But every few years, a Communist Party Congress brought together delegates from the communist world who would reconfirm their faith in his leadership. The film record of the Congress was an important tribute to Stalin.
Товарищи, разрешите выразить благодарность от имени нашего съезда всем братским партиям и группам, представители которых почтили наш съезд своим присутствием, или которые прислали съезду приветственные обращения.
Unlike the powerful, persuasive American films, Soviet films just presented lengthy extracts of Stalin's long speeches. And he wasn't a very exciting speaker. He didn't need to be.
Было бы ошибочно думать, что наша партия, ставшая могущественной силой,
Behind Stalin sits the Soviet Politburo, flanked by leaders of other communist nations.
наша партия и наша страна всегда нуждались и будут нуждаться в доверии, в сочувствии и поддержке братских народов за рубежом.
At the heart of the conflict between the Soviet Union and the United States lay a dispute over the future of their old enemy, Germany. The Soviets wanted to keep the whole of Germany weak. The Americans came to realize that there could be little economic recovery in Europe without a recovery first in Germany. In Britain, the Crown Film Unit made a film to show what life was like in Germany after the devastation of war.
What's it like in Germany?
Must be terrible.
Well, they asked for it, they got it.
Yes, but you can't let them starve.
I don't know about that. I got a son out there. As far as I can see, it'd be a good thing if some of them did die.
Well, a lot of Germany is dead. Our last bombing was directed against their communications, against convoys, trains, road and rail bridges, against goods yards, stations, viaducts. We not only smashed up the towns, but smashed up the links between the towns. And at the finish, life in Germany just ran down like a clock. Place and time meant nothing, because the links between the people were smashed too. They were just left wandering, searching, looking for food, looking for their homes, looking for each other. They are still stunned by what hit them, stunned by the war they started. But in the search for food and the urge to get home, the life force is beginning to stir again. Today, our powers of destruction are terrifying, but the will to live is still stronger. That's why we can't wash our hands of the Germans, because we can't afford to let that new life flow in any direction it wants. Our military government, that is, your husbands and sons, have to prod the Germans into putting their house in order. Why? We have an interest in Germany that is purely selfish. We cannot live next to a disease-ridden neighbor.
In the film, we can see the beginnings of the intention to build Germany up again, once what the film calls the disease of Nazism has been removed.
What about the children? For them, the desolated landscape provides a dream playground. The derelict weapons of war might have been specially designed to have games with. There are Germans who know this can't go on. The teachers must be found and themselves taught to teach the children that there are other things in life beyond Nazism and war.
Disputes over the German capital, Berlin, provoked the first major confrontation of the Cold War. After defeat in 1945, Germany was divided into 4 zones of occupation: British, French, American and Russian. Berlin was in the Russian zone. It was also divided into 4 zones of occupation. The Allies had tried to integrate their zones into the West. The Soviets responded by blocking the road and rail links between the city and the West, which provided fuel and food to the Allies' zones of occupation. This was called the Berlin Blockade. Different accounts of the blockade were recorded on film. Without coal, electricity had to be cut. And without food, Berliners in the Allies' zones faced starvation. Stalin hoped that the blockade would force the West to withdraw. But the United States and Britain organized the Berlin Airlift. Aircraft flew to Berlin from West Germany around the clock with vital supplies. Here are 2 contrasting views on the Berlin Airlift. A pro-Soviet newsreel shown in Eastern Germany and a British pro-Western newsreel shown in Western Germany. First, the Western view of the airlift, celebrating the achievement of flying in 10,000 tons of supplies in a single day.
Festzustellen, unternahm das alliierte Luftbrückenkommando einen 24-stündigen Rekordeinsatz. Auf den Berliner Flugplätzen Tempelhof, Gatow und Tegel herrschte pausenloser Rekordbetrieb. In einer ununterbrochenen Kette von 1344 Flügen wurden 10.000 Tonnen Versorgungsgüter nach Berlin gebracht. Auf dem Rückflug wurden Berliner Exportwaren für die Westzonen mitgeführt. General Klee erklärte, der neue Luftbrückenrekord habe bewiesen, dass Berlin auf dem Luftwege mit wenigen zusätzlichen Flugzeugen ebenso versorgt werden könne wie vor der Blockade.
Now the anti-Western, pro-Soviet view. In this version of events, the German people are told to be suspicious of Western motives. After all, the aircraft that were now bringing relief to West Berlin were the same planes that only 4 years before had been bombing the city day and night.
Die Musik kennen wir doch. Denkt mal nach. Wie war das doch? Damals kamen die Menschenfreunde mit Bomben und Phosphor. Denkst du noch an deine Wohnung? Weißt du noch? Dein Junge in den Trümmern. Wie fing die Geschichte denn an? Erst kamen sie mit ihren Parolen, genau wie heute.
That pro-Soviet propaganda film likened the Americans to Nazis.
Dann im Gleichschritt Marsch.
And in this newsreel, the East Germans are reminded of how much grain the Soviet Union and the other socialist states are supplying to feed them outside of the blockade.
Seit Bekanntgabe des Beschlusses der Sowjetregierung, die Ernährung Berlins auf der Grundlage der bestehenden Rationssätze zu übernehmen, treffen in Rostock laufend sowjetische Frachter mit Getreide ein. Moderne Exhaustoren ermöglichen rasches Verladen in bereitstehende Güterzüge, die nach Berlin abgefertigt werden.
Stalin finally lifted the blockade of Berlin in May 1949. The world heaved a sigh of relief. The division of Europe was formalized with the creation of the Federal Republic of Germany, which became known as West Germany, and the People's Democratic Republic, East Germany. And then with the creation of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was the Western military alliance, and with the Warsaw Pact of pro-Soviet countries. Later in 1949, the Soviets tested their own atom bomb. Now the two rival camps both had access to atomic weapons, and the world would live in the shadow of nuclear terror for the 40 years of Cold War.